Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 1 discussion. So we're 2 1/3 days into the Mirage League. Grinding Gear Games have posted one of their early news posts. We're going to discuss today what they're working on, but one thing they mention here is that there's been 11 hotfixes so far. I want to quickly cover all of those. One of them was juicy, the rest of them were pretty small, but we'll just discuss everything that's in all of them. After that, we'll talk about the things they're working on. Some of these are actually working on Grinding Gear Games' internal test servers, but they need to do more Q&A testing because the last thing they want is for one of the obscure MTX in Path of Exile's entire history to end up causing crashes alongside this thing, which is something that's not really a small fear because there have been a lot of these. Let's start with the thing that was causing all your crashes in the Act 1 town. If you were one of the players that was having a lot of trouble getting into the game and then out of the Act 1 town, that was fixed by 3.28.0 hotfix 1. What was happening here? There was an MTX, the Magus Tome hip attachment, that was not just causing the person who equipped it to crash, but it was causing everyone who saw the MTX to crash. So if you were in town and you put this on, not only did you crash, but 23 other players in your town crashed as well. On top of this though, you wouldn't know that you were the problem. You thought the game servers were the problem. So you would then log back in, and as soon as you get back into the town, which might of course mean going through all of the login queues, but as soon as you get back in, what happens? Well, your Magus Tome hip attachment is still on, and so not only do you crash, but you also take 23 more players with you inside your instance of Lion Eyes Watch, or rarely inside the instance of the Act 2 town. So this was causing huge problems early on. A lot of people were getting real server instability issues. People were saying, don't go back to town. It's something about town. I managed to dodge this somehow, but a lot of people were getting crashes frequently. It got fixed, and it got fixed about the time that the server queue went away. So it got fixed about the time that it was no longer absolutely critical for it to be fixed. That said, it was critical still. It just fell down a little bit from an absolute showstopper to just a bad bug. This got fixed by Grinding Gear Games just turning off that MTX. You can't apply it. I don't think that's even been fixed yet, but that's something they can fix over the next week or two. Now that it's no longer available, it's something that's less of a problem. Hotfix 2 was very similar. The Triumphant Liege helmet attachment, MTX, was another one that was causing client crashes. This one was fixed pretty early as well. So the first one was an hour and a half into the league. This one was 2.25 hours in. And I think this was the patch that brought stability. This was the end of people constantly complaining in my stream chat, hey, I'm crashing all the time, over and over again. There were some problems. There were definitely a bunch of problems, especially with the EU servers, something we'll talk about a bit more in a sec. But this was the end of it being crisis level and the start of it being moderately bad level. Day 1 league start does tend to have some problems with server stability. The next hotfix was not a hugely important one, except for one little thing, and that is that the top comment on the GGG official forums is an artwork of a rotating fish. Now, just be aware, this will be a bit of a flashbang. So, minor flashbang incoming in the bottom left corner of the screen in 3, 2, 1. And here's that fishy little flashbang. The fish has been deployed, but this one fixed a few instance crashes and also turned off another MTX. Celestial dominating flow. This one was causing problems. There's also a Ruthless exclusive patch there. One of the things that's at the foundation of Ruthless is that support gems are meant to be loot in the game mode. They're not meant to be something you can rely on having. Kind of like in normal Path of Exile, Armor Scraps are something you can count on having, Divine Orbs are not, even though both of them apply bonuses to your armor pieces. In the Ruthless game mode, support gems are kind of seen as being maybe not as rare as a Divine Orb, but they are definitely something that's meant to be a special drop when you get one, and that wasn't happening because Elemental Prolif and Exemplar supports were dropping as quest rewards, and on top of that there is a 3-for-1 vendor SP in Ruthless where you can vendor 3 of the same color support gem and get back another one. So that was causing a few problems in that game mode, and that got patched there. After this, unfortunately, there's no more rotating fish on the rest of this video that I'm aware of, but Hotfix 4 came along with a few crash fixes, but a big juicy change here. This is the first one that was a really big change, rather than just GGG doing stuff that was fixing really serious connection issues and the like. Temporary minions, which follow the player, now persist with you through area transitions from one combat area to another, excluding the hideout or hub areas like King's March. Buffs or stolen modifiers on those minions will not be carried over. However, at the time of this patch, this was a day 1 patch 6 hours into the league, 5.5 hours into the league, they had not yet fixed animate weapon of self-reflection. So they got it to work for everything else, but not that one. On top of that, there was a real showstopper bug for spectral shield throw as well that got fixed in this patch. So this was one that had a fair number of actual meaningful changes. Most importantly, this thing that they couldn't quite get into the first release, but that came really soon afterwards. They said they wanted it as a day one patch. They did manage to deliver that. A couple hours later, there was another client crash fix. This one was related to the Skills Stormbrand, and there were a couple of other minor things. There was a bug that was preventing players from sending shipments while playing with a controller. This would have been a problem if it wasn't day one. Obviously, someone's found it, but 7 hours in is pretty early to be sending a shipment. It's probably actually found over by a standard player, and then it's something that's been able to be fixed before it's really been an issue in the main league. And then after that, another instance crash that was just a generic one. Hotfix 6, another instance crash. This time, every time you went into the Mirage version of the Fields map, that was something that was becoming a bit more apparent to grinding your games after the league had been going for 9 hours. And you're not having many people in yellow maps at that point. I think from memory, Fields is a yellow map. Maybe I'm wrong on that at the moment. But this is the sort of thing that starts becoming apparent. You know you've got a problem then. You know it's not just one or two individuals having it. It's a really consistent problem. They can then identify it. They can then solve it. Hotfix 7 continued the crash cleanup. Again, a lot of minor ones like this. Then Hotfix 8 had a few more important things. Now, I want to quickly mention at this point one of the bugs that they haven't quite squashed. They've fixed a few of the problems, but not every single problem related to this. So here we have one where they fixed a bug where the Womb Gift locker affinity was not functioning. This is one of those problems that was never quite at the level of being infuriating, but was just irritating to a lot of people. So it's not at the right spot to put a fix for it. 30 hours in, it's not the most urgent thing. It's not as urgent as all of the actual instance crashes that are happening, but it's one that needed to get fixed. However, one thing that is sort of feels like it might be related to this, there's a bunch of things where you're clicking on something and the clicks aren't registering. For me, in the early hours of the league, I could not use the level up all gems simultaneously button at all. It just didn't work for me. I haven't logged on since getting up this morning, so I'm not 100% certain of this. But yesterday, when I was playing the game, even right to the time I went to sleep, every time I tried to access the Atlas passive tree, I couldn't click on it. I had to hit Control G instead. The clicks just weren't registering. So there's a bunch of things like that that have been constantly problematic, and they've just seemed to have been getting fixed here and there, maybe without a comment on the patch notes, which is a little bit annoying. But anyways, there's been a bunch of these minor little QOL bugs that have been popping up, and they've been slowly getting crushed. This is one of the more common ones, I guess, the Womb Gift locker affinity. It's all these little things that don't necessarily get found when you've got maybe 100 people doing QA testing, but when you go from 100 to more than 100,000 people playing the game, suddenly you start finding that this isn't just one or two issues with obscure hardware setups, but it's actually really common. Once it becomes common, it's then easy to fix because grinding gear games can look at the problems, the people that are having them, work out what the common thing is. So maybe it's that you're all running the same version of Windows 11 on your PC, or maybe it's that you're using the same exact graphics card, and then they can go and fix that thing. There was another bug that was really bad with Delve. Fixed a bug where some Azurite encounters were not completing in the Frozen Hollow and Petrified Forest Delve biomes. This was meaning that Delve, you basically couldn't do it on day one. It's not that you couldn't attempt the content, but you were having so many crashes and other issues that you just couldn't really progress down. So that got fixed then. That was about 30 hours into the league, and now people are pushing Delve in earnest. Fixed a bug where some of the loot that was intended to be Mirage exclusive was able to drop from Wild Rogue Exiles with additional rewards. So the Honored, Sacred, and Mirage Incubators, I need to do a video on some of the new League mechanic specific loot, but these are intended to come only from Legion contents that have been reflected in the Mirage world. So they were also dropping from Wild Rogue Exiles at times. Client crash and 2 instance crashes as well in this one. After this, we had Hotfix 9. This one was interesting. There were a couple of bugs related to vendor recipes. Greater volley, greater multiple projectiles. If you had a level 20 version of this gem, certain vendor recipes, which I assume is the Gem Cutter's Prism flip into 20 quality version, they just weren't working. On top of that, there was a Harvest Craft, a pretty obscure one, sacrifice a rare corrupted map, and this was not working on the new maps. Now, this probably isn't that much of a problem because maps are nowadays just not worth anything. There's so many of them dropping under the new mechanics. So this one is one of those things that's come up at some obscure point and people have then found it. Fixed an instance crash, and that's the end of that one. Then we hit hotfix 10, which is the last of the small ones. This one was this morning. And when I say this morning, I mean Monday, New Zealand time. Monday for me over in Australia. This one came out not very long after work started in New Zealand today. And it was one that fixed a buggy issue related to the memory alter modifier that revives rare monsters by expending petals, but it didn't really fix it properly. All it did is just turn it off so that it wouldn't keep causing problems. And the unique shield for auras and the like, Matua Tapuna, which most of us call Hakuna Matata, that shield was able to drop way, way, way lower in level than intended. That has also been fixed. Now we come to the meaty one. So this one was hotfix 11. This one took place 2.5 hours before I'm recording this video. And this was the one that addressed a major problem for that small section of the player base that were playing in standard. So fixed an issue where legacy maps in permanent leagues were losing delirium layers and flavor text when converted to the new map items. Maps that have already been converted may be retroactively fixed by this, but unfortunately that is only possible if the map hasn't been moved or modified in any way since 3.28 was released. So there were huge problems with this one. Your old maps that existed in standard were just completely and utterly bricked, and this was causing just a lot of problems. Standard honestly has been almost unplayable for a while. Then there was a bug fix that removed one of the coolest things I think I've seen, which is an image of a Chaos Orb that was corrupted. I don't know exactly how this was happening. I just hadn't found one myself, and I hadn't actually tried to apply a Val Orb to a Chaos Orb. Maybe it was something that could come out of strongboxes in certain circumstances or whatever. I'm not sure how it was happening. But anyways, that bug has been fixed, so no more memes of Chaos Orbs that are corrupted, unfortunately, and another client crash. So that's the last of the things that have already been done. After this, Grinding Games have 2 spots where they list what they're currently working on. The first one is their Mirage Launch Live Updates. And the main thing that's mentioned here is issues related to disconnections in multiple regions. But really, this is the EU. The EU is where the most disconnections are taking place at the moment. And I know from talking to people while I was streaming on launch day that it was a really common complaint. People were saying, hey, the EU servers, these aren't working. We're going to jump to another server. All the EU players that were in my chat, and I was suggesting, oh, look, give one a go that's geographically close to you. Some people had some success with that. Other people didn't. But it seems like there are just some general real issues with data centers in the EU. That seems to have eventually stabilized partly, but never completely. So Grinding Games are still working on this. They're aware that it was sort of an 8 out of 10 level problem on the first few hours of the league. It then decreased to maybe a 5 out of 10 problem, and it's still at that 5 out of 10 issue, and they're just trying to continue to work on it. Other than that, we have what we're working on now. This is the things that they want to change in week 1, and maybe even by the time that I'm posting this video. Sometimes their turnaround time on some of these patches can be really, really fast. But they're mentioning after this that they're continuing to work on hotfixes as they investigate reports and feedback, and they should have most of the common serious problems addressed very soon. But in terms of things that require programmer attention that aren't just dealing with things that are actually on fire at the moment, the first issue they're wanting to try to work on is some of the issues with the currency exchange. Now, I noticed this with one of the new scarabs that dropped. This is an expedition scarab, and it's something that kind of rewards you not doing the big boom in Expedition. I wanted to experiment with this, and it turns out that actually you can't buy them on the currency exchange at the moment. They just don't show up as an item that's listed there. So that's one that's being worked on. This is one of the most significant problems with the new Atlas, and they're working on improving the visibility of maps not yet completed on the Atlas. What this means is that you get a Poor Joy's Asylum drop, or you get a Shaper Guardian map drop, and you're nowhere near being able to unlock it. So you don't know where it is on the Atlas. You can now see where it is on the Atlas, so you know which direction you need to work towards if you want to be able to unlock that map and can get rid of it from your inventory, actually use it. So that's something they're working on. Improving the visibility of caches in Mirages. This is absolutely necessary. These things are basically invisible. So are the astral projections of monsters that will get summoned in. The things that work kind of like the delirium monster spawners. So there'll be little things on the ground. They look like a person wreathed in shadows. And as you approach close enough to them, they then end up summoning in a whole bunch of monsters. Those things also need to be visible, as do the caches. They're both really, really hard to see. Fixing cases where certain UI elements are not selectable. This is the one that I was talking about before, with being unable to bring up the Atlas passive screen unless I use the keyboard shortcut for it. I cannot do this with the mouse. I have to Control G. And usually I would left click on that. That's just what I find is more comfortable normally to do. Fixing an issue where standard players, and they say permanent leagues here, so that's not just standard, that's permanent hardcore, that's permanent ruthless, that's permanent solo self-found, and also all of the different combinations thereof. Fix an issue where users in permanent leagues are unable to progress their Atlas state. So this is an actual real game breaker bug for people who are playing in standard. Not being someone that plays standard myself, that's something that doesn't really affect me, but it is one of those things that, when maybe 10% of the player base is standard players. And honestly, there is nothing wrong with playing standard. It is the right thing for you to play if you're the sort of person that... So if you feel like the new league comes along and resets your progress before you're ready for it, then you're the sort of person that probably should play in standard. And unfortunately, at the moment, you can't. Standard is kind of bricked. We're also making many individual improvements to the experience of the new Atlas system, which is something that's kind of hard to say exactly what they mean there. That could mean a lot of different things. Fixing an issue where memory thread currency was not dropping from memory tears after completing all the memory lines quests. This has been the most frequently asked question that I've had from people who are solidly in red tier maps. What's going on with the itemized originator tears? The answer is they weren't working, they're going to be fixed, but this fix hasn't been done yet. The new intended behavior is that when you run over a memory tear in a tier 14 plus map, you get an itemized tear that you can then either pursue that if you want to run more originator maps and you're okay with sacrificing some agency over which tile sets you run, or if you're not interested in doing that, you can then sell it on to someone else that's more interested in doing it than you. Now, there has been a change in one of the pantheons, which is kind of interesting because I think Iceberg map is on the Atlas. I feel like I've done this league, and I'm not sure why they're changing it now, given that this is something some people have probably already got. But anyways, the pantheon for improvement for 6% reduced elemental damage taken, conditional upon you having been hit recently. This one is moving from Iceberg to Beach map. And yeah, I don't know why that's happening. But the most important one that they're working on is, of course, the one that they've saved for last. They are working on extending that thing that was done in Hotfix 4, where they made it so that your temporary minions, except for Animate Weapon of Self-Reflection, that they were able to follow you from zone to zone. And that's something they want to be the case, not just for temporary minions, but for buffs of all sorts. So the first plan is getting this to work with shrine buffs. Shrine buffs likely to be the first to get this treatment. This will be a big one, and I think this is also going to be something pretty impactful in certain places in the storyline as well. So if you find a shrine and it's near the exit of a zone, especially if it's an acceleration shrine, I'm assuming that this is then going to carry on into the next campaign area, which is going to make acceleration shrines really fun during the campaign. But the real intention here is that it's something you can then take in with you into a Mirage zone so that you can be running your, let's say you're running your Foundry map and you pick up a couple of shrines that are right near the entrance into the Mirage instance of the Foundry. You then pop through into that Mirage, you full clear it really quickly, and you pick up reflected versions of those shrines, and then you're able to take those back out into the main map as well. And then you can potentially take them with you for the boss if you feel like that's a boss that you need additional power on. So that's going to be something that's going to be better. All of that said, I have actually unspec shrines from my Atlas. I originally went in intending to do shrines, and I've changed them over to strongboxes. The reason for that is that when they reflect in the Mirage, they're okay, but they're not anything special. And the main issue is that what we've worked out so far, we're not 100% certain on how this works, but it seems like Verashta chooses between all of the different mechanics that have spawned in your map and settles down near one of them. There seems to be a bias towards one you've invested more in as well, but I haven't worked out what that investment is. So for me, I would have an expedition, I would have a shrine, and I would have RNG content in my maps. Well, sometimes a harvest would spawn and Verashta would spawn next to the harvest. There'd be just an uninvested harvest, and I'd be like, that's a bit of a waste. But what I really wanted was for her to spawn near the expedition. And so I'd go into the map, and then I'd find that she'd actually picked one of the shrines instead, and had spawned there. Now, with the strongboxes, the same issue comes up, but the difference is that the strongboxes just feel better because they have a more powerful reflection. So when you go through, you often get operative strongboxes, and those are really good. Those are the ones that disgorge a pile of about 6 scarabs. So you're always happy to see those, and even though you might prefer it to be next to your expedition, it doesn't feel like a complete waste. And sometimes Verashta shows up next to both the expedition and the strongbox, which is great. Contrast that to if it was just next to the expedition and the shrine. I'd be content with that, but it's more exciting to get the reflected strongbox there as well. That's one thing that I've noticed there. This buff, whilst it will be welcome to people that are still running shrines on their Atlas, and also just for RNG shrines in maps, It's actually coming up too late for me to really get the best out of it, but that's fine. Plenty of people will undoubtedly still be using shrines, and there is a reflected shrine that gives you additional gold drops. It's just that it's not anything really spectacular. It's just okay. Anyways, that's the patches so far, and the more chunky patch that's coming soon. The most significant of these being the emergency patches early on to deal with all of the crashing issues, the fourth patch where they had the small game design change that improved things quite a bit, and after that we have all of these things that they're working on now. I'm going to leave it there. May your Varlorbs have interesting results, and I'll see you around, possibly on stream.